wrap up, hopefully, the users can create user stories within a feature story today. So we already created the create user story API route, and we tested and logged the DTO that comes in, and that looks good. All right, but we actually need to create the database and the service and the whole module now. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and copy our features folder because it's going to look pretty similar to that, and I'm going to paste it in. I'm going to rename it, and so then it's going to be user stories. All right, and then let's start with the entity. This is going to be user story.entity.ts. All right, let's open her up. All right, so we're not going to worry about project right now. All right, so this is going to be our class user story. We will have an ID. All right, we will have a feature because the user stories correspond to a feature, and that is going to be a entity type feature. It's going to be a many-to-one relationship in that one feature will have many user stories. All right, so this is going to go to feature. And we're going to have feature. And this is going to be feature.user stories. All right, so we're getting a red squiggly line because user stories doesn't exist on our feature entity, but we can make it exist. So we're going to head over to our features entity. And we're going to copy the wording from the projects entity. So we need this one to many because the relationship goes both ways. Okay. So let's import one to many. And then this is going to be our user story entity because we have one feature with many user stories. So I'm going to have user story dot feature, and then we're going to have here user stories of user story, and then an array. Perfect. All right, so now if we look at user story, it's no longer mad. So for user story, let's go ahead and look at our database route. Okay, and so I'm sorry, I'm eating M&Ms while I'm doing this. So in our user story table, it looks like we have ID, feature ID, user story name, and user story description, with it being optional. So we're going to keep the name description optional. And then we've been adding status through. And I thought originally when I was looking at this that the status portion of this was wrong. But now I'm seeing that maybe we don't want to save the status in the actual table and we'll always reference the task. So debating a little bit whether that should be in there. I'm going to add it to match our other ones, but the good things about our database migrations is that we can, I don't know why it won't let me edit. Will let me edit this one? All right, well, we must have made Miro mad and we're not free. So now I can't edit these. That's all right. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and keep status, but in the long term, I think status is going to be something that we're going to have to do quite a bit of work on at the end of this feature to make sure everything works, okay? And that happens. All right, so now we have our user story entity. Let's keep editing. So instead of features module, we want this to be our user story user stories module. And then instead of features service, we want this to be our user stories service. So we're going to start with service here. And we are going to change this user stories service. You should be a pro at this point of setting up a new module and all of the corresponding components. All right. Then we are going to call this user stories repository. And this will be user stories repository. And then this is going to be where feature. And this is going to be user stories repository. And then we are going to save feature. ID is equal to feature ID. Well, we will have to look at that in a little bit. Oh, because this isn't. I was like, wait, why is that saying that ID is not my thing? Because that is not feature ID. Okay, so create user story, get feature user stories. All right, looking pretty good. And then get feature user stories. And we'll pass in a feature ID. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now let's edit our module. All right, this is going to be our user stories module. And then we are going to use our user stories service here for our provider and our export. And then we are going to use our user story entity here. All right, it's looking better. All right, so then now I'm going to go ahead and go to my auth module. And I'm going to have to put in my user stories module. I'm going to import that. Then I need to go to my auth service. And I'm going to need to import add my user stories service of type user stories service and add that to the constructor function in the auth service so I can use it. Okay, so now we are going to copy the create feature function here because we're going to use this to make the create user story function because they should be pretty similar. So we're going to pass in a name, a description, a user ID, and a feature ID. Okay. Then we are going to do const features. Sorry, I'm trying to think this through. So we are going to go and get the user's projects. So we need project ID then too. Okay, so we're gonna do get the projects, and then we're gonna find the projects that matches the project ID. And then we're going to say const features is equal to project dot features. Okay. And then we're going to say const feature is going to be equal to features dot find feature. feature.id is equal to feature ID. Okay, so then we're going to say if that feature that we have, if we found one and feature has the ID property to it, then we are going to create the user story using the user stories service. Okay, and we are going to pass in a feature ID, which it will get mad at now because we did not add this. So let's go to that, and we're going to do project ID. Well, actually, no, now that we have the feature ID, we don't actually need to pass in the project ID. All right, and then otherwise, we're going to say feature not found. All right, cool. All right, so we are creating our user story with this. So let's go ahead and I'm going to want to console log here, feature, and see how we go. All right, let's go ahead and add a user story and see what happens. So we're on the project page, but we're gonna have to re-log in. So it's been a while, so let's log in. All right, let's go to project A, let's go to feature K, and then we're gonna add a user story. And we're going to say user story 6. This is the description of user story 6. Create user story. Wow, our user story feature has been created. All right, cool. All right, so let's go ahead and look in the, well, this is interesting to me because I would think that it would get mad at me. So let's go trace this because I did not run my migration. Oh, you know, that's so silly of me. I didn't end up changing the, I'm just console logging. So that's funny. Okay, so we're gonna say return this dot auth service dot create user story. And then we are going to pass in what? Name. Okay, and then we also are going to need a project ID. So we're going to say user story.dto dot project ID. All right, let's go ahead and we want to add that up here. Let's take a look. Auth service, name, oh, user ID. Duh. Name, description. Then we want to say rec.user.sub. Perfect. All right, so now let's go ahead and go to the front end and see if we have the project ID at this point to even consider. So we have the feature ID, but not specifically the project ID. So here's what I'm going to do first. Okay, I am going to see if we can, I was going to see if we could do it on the back end, which we probably could, but I feel like I want to make it work before I make it better. So we're going to say project ID here. And then we are going to add project ID here. And then we are going to add project ID here. Okay, so now let's go back a step and let's find on our feature modal. All right, so we have feature ID coming in. All right, we want to add a project ID. So now we need to figure out where that is. And it's on the individual project. All right, I'm gonna get rid of these console logs as I go. All right. Okay, so that's gonna be project, right? And then dot ID. Okay, so let's create feature. Okay, so we wanna do it here. We wanna say project ID is equal to project dot ID. Then we can go to the feature modal and add it. All right, and then we can add it here. All right, and then we are going to just pass it. So we're doing a lot of prop drilling, and typically when we're doing too much prop drilling, it means it's time to refactor and use context instead. So we will go ahead and figure that out during the make it better portion of things, but for now we are going to just do what works, okay? So now we have the project ID, so we should all the way down, so we should be able to say user story 6. This is user story 6. All right, create user story. All right, we got an error, but I think it's good. It's because user story doesn't exist in our database. And it looks like the project went well, like we got the project ID. And it looks like we were able to find the feature that we popped in, which was feature K. And if you'll see, the reason why we did that, let's go to auth service, right? Is we pass in the user ID and we use the user ID to get all of the projects that the user has, okay? What we could do probably is just loop through all of the projects and look for the specific feature that we're looking for. So we probably didn't need this project ID, but again, that's going to be a make it better portion of things. Doing some prop drilling and adding the project ID to the request took me, 2 minutes? Whereas maybe it would take me longer to do some more intense filtering of my data. So there's benefits and cons, okay? But so we found a feature, all right, feature K, and that makes sense. That is the correct feature K here. And then tries to add it, okay? It doesn't have it though, so it can't add it. So we are going to CD into the API in a new terminal, and we are going to open up our package.json, and we are going to create user story table. That is going to be the name of our migration. So then let's do npm run migration generate. So we can get a migration into that migrations folder. Perfect. And then we're gonna do npm run migration run. Perfect. So then let's go ahead and take a look at our tables. So we're gonna refresh. Now we have our user story. So let's go ahead and view all rows. There should be nothing in it. Nothing yet, but let's try again and see if we can add one. All right, create user story. Your feature has been created. Woo, woo. So if I go back to my database, now I have my feature. Awesome. All right, so now we need to work on the front end a little bit to make this usable. Let's go and click off our things. So we created the user story database table. We created the user story function that adds a new user story to the database, and we have a success toast. And now we just need to edit our onSubmit function. So I'm gonna close out all of my back end things. All right, let's go to the front end and let's look at what was returned. All right, it looks like we don't console log what's returned quite yet. That is okay. All right, so we are on submit and we're setting the user stories equal to response.data. But I don't see my user story 6 pop up. So we have some sort of issue. All right, so let's scroll up. Set user stories. All right, so I'm gonna start with just console logging what comes back. Okay, so let's press K, add user story 6, test 6, create user story. Okay, response comes back and we have 2 user stories. All right, I'm guessing that the modal, feature modal is not displaying what we want it to display. So let's go ahead and look. All right, oh, yep, see we're mapping through sample user stories. We want to just map through user stories. And now you can see that this looks better. Okay, you can see that we're adding index 1 onto it, which we don't need to. So we're gonna take that away. And we are going to take that away. Perfect. So now we have to do. All right. So we can get rid of our sample user stories. All right. And we are going to instead use our features that we use on load. Okay, so let's go figure out where that comes from, and that comes from project, and then we're passing it in, right? So here we have features.map features. Okay, so let's go up here, and I'm actually going to just do an empty array here. Fine. Return that back with sample data so we're not erroring. But let's go ahead and look at project. So we're seeing what our features are. So let's go ahead and do console.log features. And we're gonna look at features. So we have 2 features. It should be K and A. Good. Okay. So then we want to drill down into it. See how there's no user stories there? Well, we want to go and add. Okay, so if you look in project services, we have this where relations features that gives us our our features, right? So we want to do the same thing within the features. All right, where I think this is 1 level out, like that, okay? But then we want to add where user stories. So now, if I refresh this page, I should get not what I want. That is okay. Let's try again. All right, that's okay. We are going to do const features. And then we're going to do console.log features. Let's make sure this is what we're calling when we refresh the page, and then we're going to return features. Let's go to our API. Let's refresh. Oh, okay, because we're not actually calling this here. So I'm gonna leave the relations user stories in, but because I'm not too worried about it, but I'm actually going to go back to projects because this is what we're calling. And I'm gonna add user stories to there and see if that helps. Oh, am I already signed out? I don't think so. I think we just have an issue. Okay, so user stories was not in project, so we're going to want to do relations within relations. Let's see if we can do that. Type ORM get relations within relations. And then we just look. Okay. Let's try that. Okay, still mad. Feature was not found in, features. There we go. All right. Now let's do this. So features to user stories. Woo, woo, woo. All right. So now we should be able to, on the project page, okay. And then we want to do user stories is equal to user story. That's a type. Okay. All right. All right. And then we can go ahead and to the feature modal, we can pass in user stories. And that's going to be features.user stories. I think we add feature here. Feature array. There we go. Is that better? Still not great. All right, let's see what this is. Oh, it's just because it doesn't exist, but what's this one? User stories does not exist on type feature array. User stories. It does look like it exists to me. All right, well, I will worry about that in a second. Let's go to our feature modal and let's add in user stories, which is going to be user story type and an array of them. Okay. And then let's bring them in here. Okay, so then we don't need, we just need to move this prop then up. All right, so let's move this here. All right, sorry, this is turning out to be a longer video than I thought. So basically, we are having an issue with user stories. The state needs to come up, and then we're going to set the state to that and then pass it down, if that makes sense. Okay, and then we got to go to, and then let's also pass down set user stories. This is going to be fun though for refactoring. And then this is going to be set user stories. All right, lots of errors though. Okay, so let's go back and let's find what the okay, I'm seeing the issue. I hope you saw the issue way before me. So all right, we're close now. Okay, so the issue is I was trying to say features.userstories, but features is an array of features, so I need it to be whichever feature is the selected one is what we are going to set user stories equal to. Okay? Which now does make me feel like it can move to feature modal. Okay, I'm gonna get rid of these sample user stories because they're not being used anymore. All right, let's look at. I think we might have to move this state again, but I'm just gonna try to make it work for a second. Nope. And then we'll back up. All right. So if I select K, I have my user stories 6 and 6. Select A, I still have my user story 6 and 6. Which shouldn't make sense because if we look at our database table here, both of these have to do with feature ID 1. Okay, so if I go and look at feature ID 1, we are going to see that that is K. Okay, so A, if I click on it, should have no feature stories. All right. So I think we need to move this back. And I don't think we need to console log this anymore. All right, very sorry. Components, you're going through a lot here. Okay. I'm gonna just say we're passing in the word stories. Okay, and then we don't need this anymore. And we don't need this. Okay, so then from here, we are going to be passing in stories, which is going to be selected feature dot user stories, and we don't need that anymore. All right, so if I look at feature K, that looks good. If I look at feature A, that does not look good. Okay, so let's open our feature modal. Oh, because we're passing in the user stories selected feature dot user stories. All right, so now we need to do some console logging. I'm gonna end this video here and then we'll pick up and do some debugging in the next one. But we are close to having this user story done. I can feel it. See you in the next one.